Hey everybody, James Clark, broker owner with Century 21 Alton Clark, here with another episode of the XLR8 podcast, and I'm really excited because we've got Brendon Payne with us. Brendon is with actually the Harrelson Group in South Carolina, and he is also the president of C21 Expert Advisors. So, Brendon, if you would, first, thank you so much for coming on. And if you would just give everybody a brief overview of kind of how you got started in the business and, what your journey's been like here in the last couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, James. And I'm excited to be here too. Appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully we'll be able to get some good stuff out for everybody. So I got licensed in 2007 and came from completely outside of the real estate industry and really outside of the sales. Didn't have any sales background or direct selling experience or anything like that. And late 2005, probably like everybody else. 2005, you're seeing people that are, have been working part-time, and all of a sudden they got a real estate license and they're making $100,000 a year. And so I think I started thinking about it at that point in time. And but it took me about 18 months to really get positioned to be able to make the move. So went through all the training, got the license and stuff, and then spent about another 6 months figuring out where I was going to actually start. I was leaving a career type position, kind of a corporate type position, where wanted to have more opportunity, but also I had a pretty healthy salary that I had to replace pretty quickly, and I didn't want to get with the wrong group and then end up bouncing around 2 or 3 times, which seemed to be in the people that I was talking with and doing my homework. It seemed to be fairly common that people were bouncing around between offices. So started with the Harrelson Group. That's where I've been since day one. And then, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, 4 years ago, Gregg Harrelson, the owner, and myself wanted to expand outside of our market, went south about 80 miles and opened up an office in Charleston, South Carolina. And so we are between both of those markets now.
That's fantastic. Now, for everybody, I want to put this into context as to who this man is and who Gregg Harrelson is, in case you guys don't know. Gregg is a powerhouse broker, been so for a long time. The Harrelson Group, Expert Advisors, top brokerage in South Carolina. Mr. Brendon Payne, who's a humble agent won't toot his own horn, so I want to let you know exactly who this guy is. He routinely is in one of the top 3, if not top 2 agents in all of South Carolina. He's been recognized in the top 1% in the United States. I think, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe last year 144 plus units, over 600,000 in GCI. This year he's already over 100 and over $500,000 in GCI. So, and by the way, Gregg, who, by the way, is a huge inspiration to me and a lot of others as well, has been a really instrumental part, not just in it sounds like your development, Brendon, but in a lot of other people's, myself included. So I'm really excited to kind of dig into you with you, because you've been able to do what a lot of people haven't been able to do, and that's take what you've been shown and execute on it and actually deliver on it in a very short amount of time. So I wanted everybody to get a good context for, you're not talking to someone that hasn't done it before. Brendon's definitely done it, continues to do it. So you heard him say he's helping lead expert advisors, but he is still knocking down 100, 150 units without question. And the year's not done for him, so I'm sure he'll do what he did last year, if not more. So let's get into, because he's got a wealth of knowledge that we definitely need to tap into. So and Brendon, what I'm kind of hoping to gain from you is like some really finite details about, like, why don't you take us back to, and by the way, can you clarify for everybody, where does the majority of your business come from first? Let's talk about that.
There a little bit. Where did my business originally come from?
Yeah, you started day one. Where did you start? Were you circle prospecting, cold calling, expireds? How did that start?
Yeah, so day one, I actually was given some lists of we're in a resort market, so we've got a lot of absentee owners, a lot of investment properties, oceanfront condos, golf course condos, and things like that. So when I started, I can remember I knew my neighborhood. I'd only been in the market for 18 months. I didn't know the market at all, but I was given a scripts to learn first. So I spent about a week, maybe not even a week, but all I did when I showed up in the office was listen to other people on the phone and then went through. And if I wasn't listening to somebody making prospecting calls, then I was going through the scripts because I wasn't allowed to get on the phones until I could actually role play with at the time Jan Pittman, who's another one of our leadership partners here in the organization. So I had to role play and get script certified with her on anything that I was going to call beforehand. So I started out with the just listed, just sold scripts and the for sale by owners and expireds. But I didn't start calling expireds probably for a couple of weeks. Just was given a list of condos. I didn't even know where they were at, a CMA to give an idea where the price range were, and I just started making calls.
So now, has that been? I mean, so you're still actively prospecting, right?
Yeah, what my day looks like now is significantly different than it was even in the first probably 5 or 6 years. But I still every day am going to come in, and at this point in time, my goal is to get an hour of prospecting in. So whether or not that is the new expireds, hit some old expireds, some of the things that are maybe we're identifying a little bit earlier in the selling process, if it's property valuation leads, or just I spend a lot of time now in my database. So the people that have been getting communication from me for years, I've got some things set up to where I can see in like a lot of us were monitoring kind of their activity on the websites and what they're looking at. So I spend a lot of time trying to focus my prospecting because I'm not doing 3 hours a day like I used to.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, are you leveraging Infusionsoft and monitoring some behaviors that way?
Yep. So we were very early adopters of Infusionsoft, and we pair that up with I've got a Real Geeks website that that system has been really really good for us, and it allows us to kind of keep track of the people that we put in it, whether they're buyers or sellers.
Yeah, we're literally been, I guess, what do they say? Copying is the best form of flattery. So
Yeah.
we're definitely doing the same things over here. So that's fantastic. So why don't you take me through literally, let's get a little bit deeper in that regard. Day one, week one, month one, like how many hours, like let's say, okay, let's fast forward 30 days in or 60 days in, whatever it was, where now all of a sudden you're calling expires and you're calling FSBOs. Obviously you got to have a build up period, right? Your days look different now because you've got momentum. But what are those early days like? How many calls would you make? How many contacts would you make? How often would you call people? How many days a week would you do this? Like, how much work went into this is my point.
Yeah. Yeah. So a typical schedule, a daily schedule for me, in the first probably year and a half to 2 years was I'd get in the office at 7:30, and we had a group. We actually have 3 or 4 people from that group that started the day I started that are still with the office.
Nice.
And so we had a core group that was in here 7:30, and we did role play for 15 or 20 minutes, and it was just what we did. That was the schedule. It wasn't like if you want to come in and role play. I looked at it and maybe the requirement wasn't there, but the way I saw it, the requirement was my day started at 7:30, came in and role played for about 20 minutes, and then from 7:50 to 8 o'clock, got everything ready to go, and then 8 o'clock I was on the phones, and I was not on the phones at 8:01 or 8:02. I was on the phones at 8 o'clock. Once I started being able to call expireds, then I called expireds, the new expireds. Now this was in 2007. So from 2007 through 2012, in our market, some days there were 60 expireds a day that came off. So for a period of time, you could literally fill a good hour and a half to 2 hours calling expireds, trying to get a hold of that very high quality lead. And at that time also, there were significantly fewer agents in the market. So there was a lot of people that were kind of dropping out because the market was getting tough. So in the early stages, a big portion of my time was spent on those expireds. When I'd get done with those, then I'd move into for sale by owners. I used, and one of the guys on my team is still using just a real basic 3x5 note card system for calling for sale by owners. And so I'd move on to for sale by owners, anything that was new or anybody that I hadn't talked with. And then I would always round out the morning with at least an hour of what you mentioned, like circle prospecting or just listed, just sold. Obviously at that time I didn't have any sold, I didn't have any listings in the very beginning, so I pick a company sale or an area that I kind of wanted to get to know and get some lists for that area, and then just make an hour to hour and a half worth of calls through that. The way it was explained to me in the beginning is you need to always, every single day, you need to fill your pipeline with immediate business. That's your expireds, your for sale by owners, the people that raise their hand and say, I'm ready, I want to do something now. Yep. Get yourself in the game competing for those deals. But you also have to build a database of people that at some point in the future, if you continue to follow up with them, then they'll come to you. That was the goal. So that was I was always very, very clear that I needed immediate business, but I also wanted to be building the pipeline for down the road. And then, my typical day, I'd go finish up there. All the emails that I got, I'd put into my very, very basic, archaic in today's terms, database. And so I knew who I'd talked with. And then, I'd go to lunch. I didn't have anything else to do. So I'd come back. And if I didn't have appointments and stuff, then I typically was getting back on the phones. And so in the first year or so, I was prospecting definitely 3 hours every day and 2 nights a week, usually from like 5:30 to 7:30 and every other Saturday for like 2 or 3 hours on Saturdays.
And you did that like every other Saturday?
Yep.
All right, cool. So Brendon, that actually brings me to a really good point. You said the word high quality leads. Can you explain to me, like, why did you choose this path and how it correlates with immediate business?
Yep. So all leads, if you're in the real estate business, you're in the sales business, which means you have to go out and generate. Now, the difference between what I said as high quality just means they've kind of identified themselves. They've already answered the question that we're all wondering is, are you planning on selling? Mm-hmm. Are you in a position where I can do something to help you out as an agent? They've already said yes. They're either on the market and now they failed to sell, or they're trying to sell on their own. So obviously the quality of that lead is higher than just circle prospecting through a neighborhood. But you also have to understand that if you're just one focus, either quality versus just going through and trying to add people to your database and going more after quantity, then you're going to lose the upside of the other half. So high quality is great, but if you sit, especially right now, if you are going after expireds and that's all you're one-dimensional, just calling expireds, then you are going to miss out on a good portion of where you choose just making calls around previous properties that have sold, because two things are at play. One, everybody in a market like this is thinking about doing something. So just because they haven't raised their hand doesn't mean they're not getting ready to in a month or two. So you can capture them. Also, we are still coming out, even though we're 4 or 5 years out of it, we're coming out of the worst downturn ever in real estate history. So everybody, for the most part, I look at everybody that I'm cold calling is probably a good chance that they're just a really old expired. There's a good chance maybe they were trying to sell in 2010 or 11, and I'm just having a conversation with a different intro, and they say, well, no, I tried to sell in 2013. Great. That's an old expired. Really a balance.
Yeah, that's a great point. So let me ask you, how did you sit there and bang the phones? Because I know Gregg is intense and I know you're intense, and that obviously has one thing to do with it. But how did you, just from a discipline standpoint, how did you do it? How did you do it 5, 6 days a week, 4 months, 4 weeks of the month? And I mean, like, how did you keep your focus? How did you do that?
So, I'll first back up to why I ended up here, or why I actually made the connection of this was something that I could do, because I think that you have to be real and decide, is this going to be the good fit? Is going out there and generating and prospecting, we'll tell you it's going to be the highest profitability, it's going to be the most predictable, but not everybody's willing to do that. The reason I was willing to do that is early on, I knew I came out of a very structured corporate background where everything that you had on your list to do dictated it. So I came out of a background where when I got into the business, I was like, I don't want to try and reinvent everything. Somebody show me the path. So in talking with all the different offices and companies in town that I talk with, it actually showed me the path and said, if you do this on a daily basis, then you should get, by the way, come on in, go look at, they did the same thing 3 years ago, and you can talk to them and find out if it works. So I came in here before I ever came on board, and I was able to make the connection between what they do on a daily basis gets them these results. I made a conscious decision at that point. I'm willing to do what they did. And I also, in my mind, said, they're not any better than I am. They're not any smarter. They're not any quicker at learning it. They're not any smoother. I'm going to be able to pull this off. So then when I got in here, the expectation was, okay, I signed up to do this in order to get this. And then it was, okay, this is what your job is. This is your new clock in. You do this for 3 hours a day. Now, it's not that easy when you get in and start doing it, because all the stuff starts creeping in your head. Am I in the right spot? Am I doing the right thing? Is it ever going to pay off? And I can remember, I was making a ton of contacts. I started getting listings pretty quickly. So I think probably within 90 days, I probably had 15, 18 listings.
Wow, no kidding.
But I didn't have any, but big deal, I didn't have any pendings, because in 2007, getting people that wanted to list their property and get out of the market wasn't hard. Getting them priced right was real hard. That was difficult. I didn't know how to price properties. I didn't really know how to have the conversation about, we're not priced right now, reduce. So I can remember, being 3-4 months in and having listings, and everybody's going, wow, you're doing really good, you're getting listings. And I remember walking in the house one time, and my wife said, or I think she said, how's your day? And I said, well, I got another listing today. And she said, completely innocently, supported me 100%. But she said, are you ever going to get anyone that sell? And I was like, oh my God. that was an eye opener, because it was like, that was the first stage. Learn what to say, then actually get listings, and then your job just started. So you had to, a lot of it's the environment. I was fortunate enough to get into an environment where people around me were doing the same thing. And that, along with the fact that I had already seen the results show up, then I just had to kind of get out of my own head and be willing to work the process.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And the environment, you're absolutely right, is huge, because everybody feeds off of each other. So going back, what when you first started, what would you say to a brand new agent that says, okay, I can do what Brendon Payne does. I just got to know the path. Break it down for everybody. Where you was 40% expired, 30% FSBOs, like, if you were to lay that out, what do you think it looked like?
Yeah, I think you really have to decide what's your goal in terms of income / transactions. So if you figure out what your income goal is, you can work backwards based on average price and figure out how many transactions you need to do. Then you have to get with someone who can give you some guidance that, based on history, a new agent coming in, brand new, never done a deal, needs to make X amount of contacts in order to do that goal of what you're trying to do. So we've always kind of, I remember coming in and said I wanted to, based on the financials and stuff, I figured if I could do 30 deals my first year, I felt like I'd be in pretty good shape. And so Gregg said, well, then you need to basically be making probably 40 to 50 contacts a day. So I just said, okay, I got to make 40 to 50 contacts a day. And I broke those up between all those different pillars. So expires, for sale by owners, rent bows, anything that I could, basically anybody that owned property. The only difference was going to be, what is your intro into the call and then learn the conversation. So it all comes down to having a contact goal that's going to help you meet whatever the financial goal is, and then setting up some accountability so that you stick with it. Really, right now, you could, if you make contacts and you have skills, you're going to get business. For somebody that's new coming in, my suggestion would be, I know a lot of people right now are coming in new, and they're seeing testimonials about, I got all this business from expireds, and I'm a professional at expireds, and for sale by owners and all that stuff, and they're coming in and they're getting discouraged early on. And usually it's one of two things. Either they're dabbling in it, meaning they're not making it a priority. They're calling them once and then hanging up and going, nah, calling expires doesn't work.
That's exactly.
Well, you can't call an expired one time.
Yeah.
You have to call an expired 10 times. And then you have to text them. Then you have to find their email. And then you have to go to 3 other services, because Vulcan gives you one number, Red-X gives you another number, 5 other ones give you 6 other numbers, and then look them up on your own. So that's one reason. You're either dabbling, or you're getting into a game of really, really high quality conversations and really, really high level conversations, and you're playing it with amateur skills. Like, you haven't worked on your skills long enough to be able to compete with people who are going in there and have literally had thousands of the same calls.
Yep. That's a fantastic point. I actually want to drill into, because you and I were talking about this before we started. So because I really wanted to get kind of finite with this, because kind of the backstories are great, but the practicality of it. So you couldn't have hit the nail on the head more perfectly when you said, you're right, people dabble, and we experience that in our office. So that people stick their toes in the water, and then they'll only make 20%, 15% of those will actually be a conversation, and that'll be a bad conversation. And then they'll use that as the reason that they don't pursue the other 80%, the other, 10, 20 potential expires that are out there, that maybe 1 or 2 diamonds are in there. So if you don't mind, and I know this is kind of technical, but how did you go about that process? Like for instance, our guys, they use Red-X, they're on Mojo dialers, a lot of them are hand dialing, things like that. Did you use multiple services? And if so, like, what would you do to hunt someone down? Because that is a huge point, because all the services, they usually give out 1, 2 phone numbers, but you can't stop there. How did you do that?
Yeah, so I have used every one of the major systems that are out there in terms of gathering up information. They didn't exist when I started, so we were all looking them up by hand. And that was really, really effective up until the point where cell phones became so prevalent. So when I started, there was about 2 or 3 years where we had cell phones, but it wasn't like everybody's primary source of communication. You were still getting people at home and landlines. Once that started, then all the services started coming out of nowhere, and you had all these the different providers that you could get. So I've had it at certain times. I've had 2, sometimes 3 providers at the same time, while my staff is also looking for contact information. So there's not one source that's always going to be the best. You have to use multiple sources, and probably equally as important, you have to use multiple ways of communicating. So just having a great script through when you get them to pick up the phone is not going to get you everything you can get through the expireds. You have to have a great text script. You have to have a great email. You have to have a great phone. You have to have a great voicemail. You have to have a great second follow-up. So you have to hit multiple factors with those people, because they're all different. There's not one thing that anybody has out there that everybody's going to respond to, but most of the people will respond to something. It's just getting getting the combination right. So you have to hit them all with multiple things. That's why I say you can't dabble in the expired and really even the for sale by owners, because as expireds got more competitive, then people moved to the second high quality type of seller, which is for sale by owners.
Okay, so walk me through. 20 expireds come off the market today. Walk me through, like, where you're gonna pull the data, how many times you're gonna call them, how many times throughout the day are you gonna vary your times, you're gonna vary
Yep.
methods. Like, walk me through that process. Like, it's Wednesday and you got 20 that just came off. What's your day look like?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to tell you from a perspective of what I'm coaching my team to do now, because I'm now a dabbler in those just from a time standpoint. So most of the stuff that I'm doing is automated through my staff, what I'm personally doing, but my agents on my team. If I've got Thomas that's going to start calling, he's calling my expireds in the morning, then he knows that he's got to get the numbers off of Vulcan. He's got to get the numbers that our VA is running and pulling for us. And then he's going to be calling them 3 times between 8 a.m. and noon. And then he's going to be following up with each one of them with a text. I'm texting them through my staff. Then in the afternoons, he's calling after lunch and then again before he leaves. Now, he didn't leave until like 6:30 or 7. So he's calling them again in the evening. So they're hitting, from my group, they're probably getting hit a minimum of 10 times with one form of communication or another with 2 different people. So 2 different faces from my team, Brendon and Thomas. And that is, that's probably going to be for the first 2-3 days. And the key here is a lot of people are trying to, I think when they are anything beyond calling, they're thinking like, I've got to be able to set an appointment off this text, or I've got to be able to get somebody to call me back and say, yes, I'm looking at selling, and when can we talk, off an email. Yeah. And that's not the goal. The goal is you just need to get people to engage with you. Yeah, so if you can get someone to engage with you who says, don't ever call me again through a text, don't ever text me again, that's engagement. I can typically get them to have a conversation with me through that response. If they'll just respond to me, I know what they want to hear, and I can communicate with them in a way that will get me to a point in the conversation where I can say, you know what, listen, I know you're busy. You're getting bombarded with calls. Do you have 5 minutes? I just want to share a couple of things with you. Now I've got a call. So while that doesn't work with everyone, that's the goal of the text conversation I'm going to have with them. Email's the same way. It's just, you have to hit them multiple times for multiple days, and don't neglect the old stuff. The stuff that's been off for a couple of months is, in most markets, is a gold mine.
Yeah, no, agreed. Your VA, are they pulling additional data from sources like, Spokio or other data tools?
Yep, they've got. I honestly don't even know which ones that they're using now, because they bounce back. It's kind of like the expireds and the for sale by owners systems. One will do something a little bit different, and then the next one will leapfrog ahead of them because they've got this new little tweak to it, or we start seeing, hey, this is getting better numbers. So I know that they're using at least 2 beyond the services, because we'll have a lot of the things that we're doing, like property valuations and stuff. You'll get partial information, or you get a bad phone number with a legitimate address. So they're using it for that as well.
Okay. So to confirm, you're using 2 tools, most likely. You're using like a Redx and a Vulcan, and then they're backing that up with some other tools?
Yep. So right now I've been using Vulcan, and then that's only real provider that we're doing. But like I use Coles. Our property records have in our MLS have really gotten pretty good. And so they're getting us some better information as well too. Not phone numbers and stuff, but they're with the condos and stuff, they're starting to make some progress and being able to identify at least the right owner.
Yeah. So now, like we were talking about earlier, we were talking about accountability and how you were able to stick to this. So did you have, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because we've experienced this with our team and I'm sure others are experiencing it. How did you maintain this discipline? Like, I heard you saying you had contact goals you had to hit, but one of the concerns that I saw with our group is that they were hitting contact goals and then saying, okay, I got my contacts. They would hustle from 8 to 11, right? And they'd hit their contact goals and then they'd be done for the day. Like, how did you go about that? How did you push past it if you had a phenomenal morning and you're like, yeah, I hit my numbers?
Yeah, so the contact goal was also accompanied by, and I had it written on my station for 6, 7 years. I will set 3 or more appointments today. So I never limited myself by just saying I'll set 3, but it was always I will set 3 or more appointments today. So at bare minimum, if I didn't set one appointment, either a go-to appointment or a over the phone appointment for an absentee owner, then I had to pick it up the next day. The goal was always 3 or more, but I had to get to the point where I was at minimum getting a new person into the pipeline. And a lot of that came back to, if you looked at my income goal and then when you went backwards, if I want X amount of income, that means I've got to sell X amount of properties, which means I'm not going to sell 100% of them. I'm going to have to get, 160 listings to sell whatever, 85 or 90 transactions, whatever that number was. I'd work backwards, and it all came down to, you have to set a certain amount of appointments, and in order to get those appointments, then you had to make a certain amount of contacts. All of that stuff, if you do it consistently, you'll figure out what your numbers are. So you're going to have your numbers, you're going to have the goal, and then whatever your actual is.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because we had hit contact goals and there wasn't enough appointments. And then literally we're like, okay, well, now there needs to be a daily appointment goal. So that way you can't just say, hey, I got 30, 40 contacts, 50 contacts, I'm done. And none of that translated into an appointment.
Yeah, and in the beginning, a lot of that's pretty typical. That's kind of the progression of, especially with newer agents that are committed. They're making the calls in the beginning. They're making a lot of calls because they know they got to make a lot of contacts. But then, if you or I were to listen to them, they'd hang up when somebody said no, and the fact that they said no, they sold that agent off the phone. But it was what the person on the other end of the phone didn't say that you and I picked up on, that now we would have taken that further. So now you have to kind of understand that just making the contacts, now you have to start listening a little bit more. Then usually what happens is you start listening more and hearing what they're asking, and now we start talking too much. So you literally go from like contactitis, making, I made my 60 contacts, didn't get anybody that wanted to sell, even though there was 3 potentials in that group. Then all of a sudden you start listening a little bit more. Now the progression is you start talking too much. Now your calls are like 15 minutes long. You're not getting into motivation, and your contracts drop. And then somewhere between those two is where a good happy medium is. And that's when you take off.
That's awesome. So let's talk about your progression. So obviously, if you put in the work and you put in the time, it should persist for you. By the way, how did you wind up doing your first year, if you don't mind me asking? Like, how many units did you close? You remember?
Yeah, so I started in May of 2007. So between May and December, I think I had 16 or 17 closed sales. My first full year, then I closed 42.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So we got a pretty good understanding. You were, and confirming this, were you or were you not? Because I know I've talked to some of the guys in your shop, and some are really good about tracking their numbers, and some of them are just like they don't need to track their numbers because they know they're not going home till they get appointments. Have you tracked your stuff? I mean, or have you just basically said I don't need to track it, and I'll just go. I'm going to keep pressing until I get an appointment.
No, I was always. I mean, it was one of those things where I'm. If you wind me up and say, all right, this is what you've got to do, especially knowing that I believed a lot in Gregg's system, and I believed a lot in Gregg and the people that he had working for him. So I was, pretty much sold out when I started. So when they said, you got to write this stuff down and turn them in, then yes, I did that from day one. Now I will say I wasn't super great at trying to make adjustments. I got to talk. I have to be in front of more people. That, like, me analyzing them, I probably, looking back on it, would have looked a little bit better and said, okay, where do you really need to work on? What's the conversation you need to work on in the listing appointment? I was just like, I need to be more in front of more people. If I'm in front of more people, I will learn it. And so now on the coaching side of it, I've realized how important, how those numbers can really, they give you just instant insight into what's going on with the agent. Just instantly tells you, okay, here's where it is. You're not pre-qualifying. You're setting all these appointments and you're not getting any listings, and it's pre-qualifying. Or you're not setting any appointments. It's your finding motivation conversation.
Yeah, and that motivation conversation's the central part of it. So now, and I completely agree with you too in regards to believing in Gregg System, and I think a lot of people don't believe in it because Mike Ferry. A lot of people will pick at the simplicity of it, and they'll just be like, "Well, this isn't enough," and they don't see the genius behind the simplicity of it. And just being able to duplicate it. So they pick it apart and they tweak it, and the next thing you know, they're changing it 10 times throughout the course of a year, and nothing ever works.
Yep.
So are you pretty much now rock solid, still using the same scripts you used when you started?
Yeah, I mean the core. Now, if you look at the script book that I learned from, it doesn't sound anything like that because it's been personalized. But the way that I interpret the scripts, and I think there's probably different philosophies on this, and there's always different levels. But the script is really a guideline. And in the beginning, when you don't have enough expertise and you don't have enough deals behind you to really be able to communicate like one-on-one and really from experience, then you have to have a roadmap. And so when you get off on some tangent, then you can get back on to where you're going A to Z with a script. Over time, you take the concept of the script, though, and you personalize it, and it becomes a conversation. The interesting thing is, and it's shocking when people say, well, I don't want to use a script, or I don't, we can give somebody the script, have me record the script, give it to them, and they'll still change it. Or they'll be on the phone, you'll be listening, you'll be going, just yesterday, I said, so where did that conversation, where did that getting the email script come from? Because I've not heard that before. Well, I just made it up. Okay, so you're willing to use a script because they said it like 3 times in a row. So he was using a script. It's just one that's not working. You're going to, if you're on the phone and you're making contacts and you're not being productive, understand you are using scripts. You're just saying the wrong stuff. So just find somebody to give you a script that works. Learn that one.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So tell me, how did you start firing off? You closed 40 some odd deals your first year, which is phenomenal. At what point did you be like, all right, something's got to change here? I got to start adding people to the mix. I got to leverage my time. When did that happen? What kind of units were you pulling when you made that decision, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so I think probably maybe after my second full year, then it really just kind of happened by chance. I don't think it was necessarily a plan at that point. I knew I didn't always want to be, I didn't always want to be just listing properties. I was part of the reason why I was so sold on what Gregg was doing is because I knew he had a big vision. And I knew that my proximity to him might open up, if I could prove myself, it might open up some opportunities. So that was really the beginning. Was, we had a couple new agents come in, I think, and they said, okay, well, go listen to Brendon, go listen to somebody else. And maybe one of them had mentioned, gosh, maybe I can listen to you or go on a listing appointment. And so in conversations with Gregg, that's kind of how I started building the team, really with just newer people that came on. I never really recruited anybody, but a new person that would come on, there was a give and take. They'd make some calls. I'd help them with kind of get going. And so I had the benefit of being able to make more contacts. They had the benefit of not having to learn everything on their own and set up all the systems. So, that's kind of how I started building it. And it was, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't do that way again. Just because it was super, super, super time intensive on the listing side. Finding people that are going to be really strong listing agents, and trying to coach them to do that. You have to understand, a lot of people are probably not going to stick around long enough before they say, I'm not sure on the listing side, or I'm going to do something else. And the ones that do usually realize, what, I'm pretty good at this stuff and I want to go on my own. So you have to kind of be cautious of that if you're thinking of building a team and stuff. But that's kind of how the progression, it just was kind of by default, having people come on board and trying to help them out, and at the same time they're helping me.
What about from a support staff perspective? At what point in time did you say, okay, I got too much on my shoulders, I need people running in the back end? Because like some of our folks they're getting bogged down with the paperwork. They're getting bogged down with entering people in the systems and running and this and that, and it's diverting them from making more contacts. Like, at what point did you say, no, I got to do something else there?
Yep. About 6 months later than I should have. So when I started, going back to what I said, I got started early, was coming in every day, never missed a day, was very disciplined, making my contacts, getting listings, but didn't have anything to show for it. Didn't, those 16, 18 sales, they took place probably between September and December that year. So it was all at the end of the year. Gregg told me, when he saw that I was being consistent and had some skills at getting listings and stuff, he said, you need to consider hiring somebody going into 2008. Well, going into 2008, me taking on staff that was going to be, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, 12 months salary, $25,000 at the bottom end to hire an admin. I hadn't even gotten $25,000 in income yet, I don't think, at that point. So that was a scary step, and I didn't do it. I wanted to see the results before I believed that, now was the time. So I hung out and waited until probably the beginning of the second quarter of 2008. So I was a year in before I started looking at hiring somebody, and did exactly what you just said. I lost so much business because I was coming back, putting in a listing, trying to figure out, this lockbox thing, put lockbox on, trying to make copies of keys, all this crazy stuff that took away from the income generating side, and I was spending time on servicing. Then when I finally figured it out, you're losing business, you're going backwards. Then at that point, you have to go through the learning curve of hiring staff. And that new in the business, I didn't really know what I needed. So I sure didn't know the type of person that I could hire that was going to be a real great team player. And so I went through probably 2 or 3 admins over the next 9 to 12 months. And, so I was a good probably 18 months in before I got a little bit stabilized on the staff side and really started seeing I was able to then take the time that they were saving me and reinvest it into, more generating.
Yeah, I think that's one of the traps. I know I've gotten caught in it in my own business, pulling that trigger before you need to. It's kind of like, you're running a marathon, you hydrate in advance, you don't wait till you're thirsty, but man, it's such a hard thing to do.
Yep.
It's such a hard thing
when it costs money. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I've taken a lot of your time. I want to blow through the last couple questions here. It's been great to kind of pick your brain here a little bit. What advice, what would you say now? What are you telling your new agents now that you're coaching? A lot of people, they have great apprehension to calling. Do you, are you looking more at the person's personality type and then using that to guide them to what form of business should they go in, or how are you kind of going about that?
Yeah, one of the things I think that's helped a lot in me recognizing how to coach agents is understanding that we all make up a lot of stuff about what prospecting, the terms prospecting, generating, all of that stuff means. And I think we have to recognize, we as leadership have to recognize how we're communicating with the agents, and the agents have to recognize too what they're hearing. At the very core, you're in real estate. This is a sales business, and in sales, you have to go find people some way, somehow, that are willing to do business with you. Every day you're going to have to get up and find somebody that's going to do business with you. If not, you're going to wash out, or at minimum, you're not going to meet, your potential of what you can do. If there's an issue with that, it's probably not going to work, period. If you're okay with that, and you're like, well, yeah, I know, I just don't want to be cold calling. Okay, then you don't necessarily have to cold call. But when you have leads that are coming to you, then you have to continue to reach out to them, because you have to eventually be in a conversation with them. Like, there's a lot of times I have a conversation with somebody and they're like, I don't want to come in and I don't want to be doing, prospecting and this whole generating thing. That's not me. It's not my personality. Okay. So if we gave you some stuff that came in and they had some questions about maybe what values and stuff were, how would you feel about that? Oh, I'll call them all day. Okay, we just changed a little bit of a shift in what they thought they were doing and what they thought that other person was on the other end of the line, and that makes a big difference. So for somebody new coming in, the first thing I would say is you have to understand you're in a sales position, and no matter where those people come from, what source they come from, you have to be willing to go out and start a conversation with people. If not, you can probably do some deals. In a good market, you'll stumble across the family member, the referral, that they'll literally come over to you, and you can be scared to call them, and they'll call you. Hey, Jimmy gave me your number. Can you come list my house? Yeah, you might do a few deals a year from that. But if you actually want to be in control and grow it from just the random seller or the random buyer that does business with you, you're going to have to be on the outbound side of it, and then just figure out what area that you're comfortable with and get somebody to show you what to say.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what do you think, what are the most common pitfalls that a new agent falls into, in your opinion? What are you seeing in your market? What are the habits that they're not leveraging? What are you seeing is being, so like literally somebody that's brand new watching this, like what do they need to look out for?
Yeah, now more than ever, I think a lot of what's going to probably come back and hurt a lot of people is they are coming in and doing some business and they really don't have a plan. Like they're doing, people can do business right now in this market by default. You just come in and you got a license in your proximity to people that are doing deals, and you come across somebody. There'll come a time at some point where your skills are going to be important, and knowing what to say is going to be important, and how to say it. So for people coming in right now, you have to decide where are you going to get your skills? How are you going to set up your systems to be able to be in this for the long run? If you're in just riding the wave, cool. You're riding the wave. At some point, the wave's going to crash, and you're going to be moving on. But if you're really committed, then just understand this is a business where your discipline equals your freedom. And most of us, myself included, before I got in and started working it, I had the same conversation. Why are you getting into real estate? Why are you quitting your job and getting into real estate? I want unlimited income potential. I want freedom. I want all this. All that stuff is there. But before I got in the business, my perception was when I made the move, I got all that. You actually have to increase your discipline, and with the discipline comes unlimited income potential, all the freedom, and all that stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So that actually you led me perfectly into my next question. Obviously, this market is not going to stay doing what it's doing, and we're going to see a need for people to have a higher skill set here in the next couple of years. I think you hit it perfectly, saying that right now you can literally trip across business. But can you speak to the fact, and you kind of already touched on it, and I'm sure you guys are probably talking about it. I know because I talk to Gregg pretty consistently, so I know you guys are talking about it. But how crucial from your perspective, because you've already worked in a market that was not so great, and you've worked in a good market. How important is this skill set? Like in particular, we've got a crew here in our office that they're like, wrapping up like their first full year, and they're, you know, questioning whether or not they turn to their SOI or commercial or whatever. Like, how important is it now more than ever to stick to what you're doing?
Yeah, you know, I've always been taught, and I say this at least a couple times a week. If you follow the process, the results show up. And so in this business, it's very reactive. We can get pulled from one thing to the other, and at the end of the week, we can have a super busy week and have nothing to show for it. And one of the things that I think agents get really frustrated with is they measure themselves on the results versus their commitment to the process. So they go out and for whatever reason they get 2 listings this week and they're like, man, I figured it out. I have figured this out. James told me this is going to come around, and it's coming around. I'm finally getting it. And then the next week they're going to have a fall through on one of their deals that they've got under contract, and they're going to get beat out on 3 listings, and a buyer's not going to show up, and they're going to be like, I was a one-hit wonder. This is so tough. What is going on? I can't do this anymore. And so their self-worth, their am I good enough to be in this business is all based off of the results that they're having. And that is no different when you're a new agent going from 0 to 5 deals, or when you are an agent doing 200 and trying to get to 300. If you focus what is good about your day and how you feel about yourself and the results, you are always going to be on that crazy roller coaster. If you focus on, this is the process that I need to work in order to get to my goal, then you can leave at the end of the day and say, you know what, did I hit my contacts? Did I do this? Did I do this? Did I set this up? And then judge whether or not that worked. And I promise that will end up getting you the results you want. And if it doesn't, then it was just a mess up in your plan, and adjust it. But that's probably right now where, if people are just starting out and they're getting a little frustrated, that's what they need to look at, because there is going to be change. There's always going to be change in the market, and you always have to be preparing.
Yeah, no doubt. So, last question for you. So, what does the Brendon now that has closed hundreds of deals, made millions of dollars, what does he say to the day one Brendon? What does he say? Hey, listen, man, don't do this, or, you know, don't go down that street. Don't chase that shiny object. What would you tell yourself? Like, you obviously did it really right? You've trusted one of the premier coaches in the United States in Gregg, and you've obviously become one of the top agents in the United States. So you obviously did nothing wrong, right? But what shortcuts? What shortcuts could you take now if you talk to yourself back then? What would you say?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I definitely did not do it all right. I just did a lot of the stuff. I did a lot of the stuff that made a big difference, I think, over and over and over again. I'm not sure that I did the majority of it right, but that's my answer. Is I would tell myself you're always going to be okay. Your core stuff that you're doing, you're committed to, and you got the skills early. You are not going to you're not going to go out of business. It's not going to, all the wheels are going to fall off after being in business for 6, 7, 8, 10 years. You're not going to fail to the point of like, what happened? So fail more often and make moves quicker. The hesitancy in this business can stifle you, and that's, can keep you wherever you're at, whether it's 5 deals or 500 deals. It's typically the moves that you're willing to make to grow, and your timing of not doing that quick enough that holds us all back, I think.
You nailed it with that assessment. I don't think you could have said it. I don't think you could have said it much better. It's amazing how if you don't stop and look backwards, and realize, hey, I've gotten to this point, but everybody thinks they could go out of business tomorrow. Everybody thinks that like they live and die with each deal, and that can cause them to shut down. And it's what a good piece of advice for anybody that's watching this. That, listen, if it's not day one, having trust in the process and understanding that, having a bad day, bad week, bad month doesn't put you out of business as long as you keep doing what you've been doing. And that's what I just heard from you is just stick to doing the process, stick to doing what you're supposed to be doing every day. Stop worrying so much about results. I mean, would you say, Brendon, that was there a point in time where you surrendered to the results and just said, that's it, it's process? I mean, was there ever a point in time where that happened for you?
Yeah, I was, and I remember it. Like, and I'll never forget it. So I made a commitment to my wife when, because I left a corporate job, had a salary, had a company car, expense account, and had to replace income. Left on Friday, had to start on Monday as a realtor with no income. So probably about 60 days in, and I had this beaten into my head from Gregg, from Jan, follow the process, the results will show up. I beat it into my own head, follow the process, results will show up. But I had made a commitment that we had an equity line on our house that we looked at. We said, okay, we got X amount in savings that is going to get us, 3-4 months in. And then we had this equity line as like the second parachute, but I made a commitment that we were not going to get to that point. And we had probably about $4,500, I think, in the account before we were going to have to tap into that equity line. Wow. And I was sick to my stomach.
Wow.
Sick to my stomach. And I had been doing a ton of mindset, listening to everything I could get on it and just trying to stay ahead of it because of stress. I knew that I know the stress that people go through. And I just, on Grissom Parkway, which is in Myrtle Beach, I remember saying to myself, you have got to just literally start believing this stuff you keep telling yourself. You're not believing it. And that was the turning point that I just, to your point, I surrendered and said, just let it go. Follow the process. You are not dumb enough to go out of business and end up in a van down by the river and with no money. You might not do it exactly the way you thought it was going to look, but you're going to be fine. And I never accessed that. And man, it got close. I
literally exact same story. And just from my perspective, there's no way to say this without coming off as crass, but like you just heard like what he went through, and I went through the same thing. Anyone watching this thinking you get to skip that crap? You don't get to skip that.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like you do not get to come in and just hit a home run and not endure. And for the people that are feeling that squeeze right now, it has to be learned from and used and understood. That's dues. You got to pay that.
Yeah.
And for me, I had a surrender point, just like you, where I said, okay, that's it. I'm not an idiot. I know I can do this, and money's tight, but I'm just going to put my head down. And the minute I stopped focusing on needing, because it's like as soon as I needed that deal to close, it fell apart, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And as soon as I focused on, I'm just going to go find more deals, and I'm not going to worry about that deal and whether or not that buyer financing fell through, and I'm going to live and die when that happens. The
other thing too that just, as I think through and go, if I was brand new today and I had to pay my dues, hopefully this will help somebody out there that people that are doing big business haven't done that. That's crap. There is a misconception that because of, social media and all this stuff, and everybody's a coach and everybody's, gets an audience of people to listen to. And we got people that are coaching and they're in our MLS and they haven't done any deals in their career. So somebody watching that's like, well, I don't see the struggle. I don't see them making all these contacts, which is driving them to go try to find another way. There isn't. They're either full of it and not doing the business that they're saying, or they've got a story like that where they were literally on, at the end of the rope going, I'm trying to believe this, but man, somebody help me. So it's, I think it's encouraging, because when we talk to people who've been through this, we all have a story. We all have a story where we were almost broke. Some of them have stories where they made it and then they almost went broke.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, what a great point. Well, listen, bud, here's the bad news. The bad news is I may need to hit you up again, because I didn't get anywhere near as deep into you and your processes that I want to. But, man, how it's so insightful, and to hear it come from somebody that's been in the business so long, like you, and just been so tremendously successful. And, listen, and for any of you that are watching, to reiterate this point, Brendon and Gregg, their company, Kevin Mills, KJ, I mean, the whole crew out there, they are the most productive Century 21 in the freaking system. I mean, there's nobody with a higher purge and productivity than this firm. And it's really awesome to see. I was looking at the South Carolina numbers, and it's amazing, man. It's like every other person is barefoot, Harrelson, expert, barefoot, Harrelson. It's really impressive stuff. And because of that, Brendon, if maybe, sometime not too distant in the future, maybe we can circle back and kind of finish off this conversation in regards to some of the more particulars in regards to how you got where you are today. Because I think where you are today is a very different look. And what I know from the guys that we have and that we talk to all the time is that they don't want to do it forever. They want to evolve, and you have evolved to a really cool place where you're in leadership, you're in coaching, and you're still in production. So if you'd be up for it, man, I'd like to talk to you again about maybe phase 2, about how you landed here, where you are now, and what that looks like, because I think that would be a really interesting conversation too.
Anytime, I'd be happy to do it.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, Brendon, any other parting words? I mean, that was very insightful. I loved hearing your struggle. I mean, a lot of people can look at your numbers and go, man, he doesn't know. He just kills it. He doesn't know. And it's so cool to hear that, no, you earned exactly where the hell you are, and you have a right to be there. And more importantly, you put in the work, and you just showed up, and that's huge. So any parting thoughts for those watching?
No, and don't. I'd rather people see less of, he put in the work and paid his dues, and more, I can do it if you choose to. Like, I'm just disciplined. There's not anything spectacular. It's just, committed to the project. So,
that was funny you say that, because I came and visited you guys. I actually brought my team, Gregg, and you guys were so gracious enough to have us up there. And that was the number one thing when we walked out of there. Not only is obviously Gregg and you and the whole team, not only are you guys just motivating as hell, but, and please don't take this the wrong way, we walked out of there and I told them, I go, guys, they're normal people. They just do it. There's nothing special about KJ or Kevin Mills or Brendon Payne or Gregg. They're normal people. They just show up and they became masters at a craft. But it's not like, they're walking around with halos over their head. This is so achievable and attainable, but there's no skipping the process. You have to, like, you guys you've mastered your craft. That doesn't happen overnight, but it's so doable. It is.
Yep. 100%.
Awesome. Well, listen, dude, thank you so much for your time. I know I took a lot of it. I really appreciate it. We'll chat here again soon, and maybe dig into this a little bit deeper. But listen, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate your time.
No worries.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Awesome. Cool, dude.
Cool.
Listen, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I kid you not. I don't think I even scratched the surface, because, a lot of our guys, they're very much about, like, they want this as a means to an end. Like, I see a lot of them wanting to step into roles like where you are now, in a leadership position, starting to maybe get into their own investing and do things like that. But, right now it's about keeping heads down and not looking up until it works at the highest level possible. And it's funny, they're always like, they'll pick apart, like, well, they're in a resort market, it's different. I'm like, you say so, but it's the same to me, man. It's hell that you guys have 40% less transactions than we do. I mean, you guys have, I think it doesn't matter. If you commit to the process, you could do this in California, Nevada, New York, anywhere.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the thing is that, when we see that in Charleston, the agents give us the same thing. And they say, well, you're the resort market. You got more absentee owners. You don't have to go on as many appointments. They're over the phone. And it's like, wait, listen, we're talking about transaction goals and things like that, and income goals. Your price point is 45% higher than us. Just do, okay, so you don't want to do 80, do 40. It's the equivalent of doing 80 in Myrtle Beach. Yep. There's a lot of, I think that drama is really just creative avoidance for just not wanting to follow the process.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, if I ever get to figure that shit out where I can identify that in people and keep their eye on their prize, I'm going to bottle it and sell it because
I know.
it's the.
I'll buy it.
Yeah, tell me about it. All right, dude. Well, listen, thank you so much, man. I apologize that it went longer than was supposed to, but
nah, no worries.
Most invaluable, and I appreciate your time. And then I'll be in touch here soon. Are you going to?
I was going to ask you immediate leadership.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Okay.
Are you going to be there?
Yep.
All right. Well, I already told Greg the other day that I owe a mistake, so I'll throw you in there as well. And Miami's my hometown, so I'll find us something good.
Sounds good.
All right, buddy.
All right,
Thanks again.
Thanks,
all right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.